Welcome to the Professor English podcast, where we don't just talk about English, we practice using English. My name is Ryan, and I'm your host. Have you ever wanted to read an entire book in English? Have you ever thought about improving your English vocabulary through reading? If you answered yes to these questions, you're in the right place. In each episode of this podcast, we're going to explore the book 1984 by George Orwell, paragraph by paragraph. First, I will read the paragraph. Then we will examine the contents of the paragraph to make sure the meaning is clear. Then, we will do a fluency and listening comprehension exercise to practice some interesting expressions that we find in the paragraph. Sound good? Great! Let's jump right in and take a look at the first paragraph of page 2. But before we do, I just want to remind you that if you prefer a little visual help, you can find the video version of this podcast on my YouTube channel, Professor English ESL Class. This paragraph is pretty long, so I'm going to cover it in 2 episodes. This is the second half of the paragraph. Now on page 1, Winston is entering his apartment building and walking up to the 7th floor because the elevator isn't working. In this paragraph, he is entering his apartment. There is a TV on the wall, and he cannot turn it off. He can only lower the volume a little. Let's read the paragraph once, and then we'll talk about the meaning. Here's the paragraph. He moved over to the window, a smallish, frail figure, the meagerness of his body merely emphasized by the blue overalls, which were the uniform of the party. His hair was very fair, his face naturally sanguine, his skin roughened by coarse soap and blunt razor blades and the cold of the winter that had just ended. Now let's take a closer look at the first sentence. He moved over to the window. Smallish, frail figure, the meagerness of his body merely emphasized by the blue overalls, which were the uniform of the party. The ish ending in smallish is frequently used in conversational English, but it is not typically taught in ESL classes. So we're going to practice using this later in the podcast. The ish ending makes the word it is attached to more of an estimate or a guess or approximation of something. So if you say something is small-ish, it means not exactly small, or not extremely small, or not really small. Orwell talks about Winston's smallish body, which means he isn't really a small person, but he somehow looks smaller than you would expect, or something about him seemed a little small. We're going to practice this ending after we have finished discussing the rest of the paragraph. So don't worry if the meaning isn't exactly clear yet. It will be by the end. He moved over to the window. He looked small, even though he wasn't small, and frail. Frail is another word for fragile. Frail means easily broken, or could even mean weak. So now we come to the word meager, and meager means not sufficient, not enough. If a person looks meager, you can imagine someone who doesn't have very much muscle or very much fat. If someone looks meager, they look unhealthy because they don't have enough muscle, they don't have enough fat, maybe they don't eat enough food. His blue overalls emphasized his meagerness. So overalls are a one-piece suit designed for workers. Usually it's a full pair of pants, but the top usually just covers the chest. So it's not really a full shirt. There usually aren't sleeves. His overalls, his work uniform, or the party uniform, showed very clearly his weak body. So because of the way the overalls fit, maybe you could see his bones. You didn't see muscle or fat, you just saw his bones. His meagerness was emphasized by the overalls, which everyone in the political party wore. It was the party uniform. Let's try to rephrase this sentence. He moved over to the window, and as he's moving, we can see he's very unhealthy looking. He doesn't have sufficient muscle or sufficient fat. The uniform, which is a combination of a shirt and pants in one, called overalls, showed this situation very clearly. Now let's take a look at the next sentence, which is, his hair was very fair, his face naturally sanguine, his skin roughened by coarse soap and blunt razor blades, and the cold of the winter that had just ended. Fair in English, which maybe you've seen before, meaning like just or justice, can also mean light color. So when someone has fair skin, it means their skin is a very light color. Here, Orwell says Winston has fair hair, which means he has a very light color of brown hair, or perhaps even blonde hair. That's what fair hair means. His face naturally sanguine. The word sanguine is not a very typical word, but it means he manages to look happy or optimistic even though he finds himself in a bad situation. You don't have to worry too much about learning that word. So, but we can rephrase this sentence to mean his face looks, the phrase, his face looks naturally sanguine, as he always looks cheerful, even during bad times. So he has light hair and always looks very cheerful, even if he's not. Okay. Now let's move on to the next sentence. His skin was roughened by coarse soap and blunt razor blades, the cold of the winter that had just passed. His skin roughened by coarse soap. Hopefully you know the word rough. That's a pretty common word, probably one you learned already. But coarse, maybe not. And coarse is a very similar word to rough. So if you're using rough soap, coarse is kind of like the texture of sand. So if you're using coarse soap, then the soap kind of has a sandy texture to it, which you can imagine what that would do to your skin. So it would roughen your skin, make it rough. His skin roughened by coarse soap and blunt razor blades. Blunt is the opposite of sharp. Have you ever tried to shave with a blunt razor blade? A razor blade that wasn't sharp. Maybe it was old. Be careful, because it might roughen your skin. All right, let's review the paragraph with less complicated words. So he moved over to the window. He seemed very small, even though he wasn't very small, and fragile. He looked unhealthy because he doesn't have enough fat or muscle on his body. He looked meager. And it was very easy to see this because of the way his uniform was fitting on his body. He had light-colored hair, and he always had a happy expression, a happy look on his face, even in bad situations. But his skin looked bad because of the weather and the quality of the soap and the razors that he used. All right, great. Now, let's take a closer look at this word ending, ish. Ish is a very informal ending. You really should not use it when you are writing, even though it's fairly common and useful in conversation. Adding ish to the end of a word can mean approximately, near, around. Let's try some examples and practice how to use this ish ending, meaning approximately, near, or around. Now, so if I say the car is green, how would you ask me a yes-no question with that sentence? The car is green. Is the car green? Okay, great. How would you answer no? How would you say no? No, the car isn't green. All right, great job. Now, make a what color question with that sentence. So if we say no, the car isn't green, how would you ask, well, what color? What color is the car? What color is the car? Okay, now let's answer with greenish. Greenish. That means it's not really green, but it's a kind of green color. I know I've met some people who sometimes they get some types of blue confused with some types of green. That's strange to me. I've never had that happen, but I've met people who get confused sometimes between blue colors and green colors. So if you say the car is greenish, that means, well, it's not exactly green. It looks a little bit like green, but I don't know what to call it. The car is greenish. The car is greenish. The car is greenish. Around green. Near green. Close to green. Okay, great. Let's try another example. We should meet at 11. We should meet at 11. How would you make a yes-no question with that sentence? Should we? Should we? Should we meet at 11? 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 Okay, let's answer no to that question. Let's say no. No, we shouldn't meet at 11. We shouldn't meet at 11. Great. Now, let's ask a what time question. What time should meet? What time should we meet? What time should we meet at? What time should we meet at? What time should we meet at? Let's answer 11ish. 11ish. That means around 11. Maybe 10:50, maybe 11:10, sometime around 11. Not exactly 11. We should meet at 11ish. We should meet at 11ish. I never do that. I never give times like that, but some people do. We should meet at 11ish. All right, super duper job. Now, let's try another example, but before we do, I just want to ask you if you found these exercises helpful. If you answer yes to that question, then please make sure that you subscribe to this channel so that you won't miss the next helpful exercise. And if you're watching this podcast on my YouTube channel, Professor English ESL Class, then be sure to press the like button. It helps my channel so much and tells me that you enjoy these exercises and want to see more. Now, let's continue practicing. The computer was cheap. The computer was cheap. How would you make a basic yes-no question with that sentence? The computer was cheap. Was the computer cheap? Was the computer cheap? Okay. How would you answer no to that question? No, the computer wasn't cheap. No, the computer wasn't cheap. How would you ask about the price? What was the price? How would you make that question? What was the price of the computer? What was the price of the computer? Okay, now let's answer with cheapish. Cheapish, which means wasn't really expensive, but it wasn't a huge discount. It wasn't an enormous discount either. Maybe it was like a little discount, or maybe less than you would think, but it wasn't what you would say is cheap. Cheapish. The computer was cheapish. The computer was cheapish. The computer was cheapish. All right, super duper job. Let's do one more. The chocolate tasted sweet. The chocolate tasted sweet. Can you repeat that? How would you make a basic yes/no question with that sentence? Did the chocolate taste sweet? Did the chocolate taste sweet? Okay, let's answer no. No, the chocolate didn't taste sweet. No, the chocolate didn't taste sweet. Okay, can you ask a how taste question? How did the chocolate taste? How did the chocolate taste? Now we can answer with sweetish, sweetish, which means maybe there was a little bit of sweetness, but that was not the main flavor. It was there, it was a little bit. You know, maybe it was, sometimes the dark chocolate has a little bit of sweet, but that's definitely not the main flavor. The chocolate tasted sweetish. The chocolate tasted sweetish. Now, let's revisit the original sentence, which was, he had a smallish, frail figure. Okay, now so this means that the body seemed small. There was something about it that made it look small, but it wasn't really small. So because he uses the word frail, which means easy to break, and meager, which means not sufficient, like maybe not sufficient muscle, not sufficient fat, we can imagine that he really is not a small person, but he looks small because he's weak and unhealthy looking. That's why he looks smallish. He's not really small, but he looks something like small because of these other problems that he has. All right, super duper job. Well, that's it for today. It's been really fun practicing English with you today, and I hope to see you again here very soon. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel and press the like button. But until the next paragraph, I will see you later. Goodbye.